Okay, so let's continue. I hate to tell you this, but this is what it's like to read something difficult. Difficult things are meant to be read and they are meant to be studied, and you're supposed to stop every couple of sentences and think about them and take notes. I will say that the more things like this that you read, the faster it goes. I mentioned in the last video that one of the things we're trying to do is train your instincts. This class is designed to give you good instincts. Um, and those instincts, I'm trying to take the things on that worksheet, quote something, introduce the quote, put it in your own words, give some examples, tell me how much you agree or disagree with it, give reasons for those feelings, give examples to go with that, consider both sides. Those kinds of things are I'm trying to get you that in your brain. But once it's in there, you'll be able to read stuff like this faster and faster and faster. Although lots of grown adults, who have been alive for many years, read like this all the time. People in Bible study groups, for example, this is sort of what Bible study groups do, right? They get together with the Bible and they read a couple of words and a couple of sentences, and then they stop and they talk about it and they think about it and they read about it. And the preacher says something and then they think some more about it and then they continue to read a little bit more, and then the preacher says something about that and then or the minister or whatever, and that's how you go through the Bible. That's why people don't. You don't just read it once and be done with it. It's something you spend a whole lifetime on. And this kind of stuff is like that. It's designed for you to kind of spend a lot of time. There are people who have devoted their entire life to the study of Plato, and that's all they do. Is they just like you may know very religious people who read the Bible over and over and think about it and join Bible study groups, and there are philosophers who just read Plato over and over and over again, and they're members of little Plato discussion groups. When I went to school, and granted that was grad school and not undergrad, but when I went to school, we had groups. And if you were going to read a book, you would want to get together with some other people who were also reading the book so that you could stop and talk about it. You didn't just like read the whole thing from cover to cover, right? You read a little bit, you went in, you talked about it, you thought about it, you took a walk, you had lunch, you did some other stuff, you took a nap, and then you got up and you thought about it some more, and then you read a little more. And that's how this is supposed to go. For a lot of my students, this is incredibly unfamiliar territory. A lot of my students don't read at all. A lot of my students have never read a book, which is fine. Actually, it's kind of awesome because if you've never read a book before, holy shit, this is a very intense first book to read from cover to cover. But make no mistake, this is a book. If you watch all these videos, you've read the book. Me reading the book to you counts. I'm here to tell you that. As a guy, I do audiobooks all the time, and I have famous people will like read books in my ear because I love audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks like 2 hours a day while I'm doing dishes and cleaning the house and shopping and running errands and stuff. So I listen to and while I work out. So I do a lot of audiobooks, and I've decided that someone reading the book to you for audiobooks, that counts. I feel like I've read the book since someone read it to me. So I think if you watch all these videos, you read Plato. And don't let anybody tell you you didn't really read Plato. Plus, I put the book on screen when I was reading it, so you were reading along with me. That counts. You guys are getting a very serious education here. This is intense. Okay, cool. Going good. We're on page 3. Let's keep going through Lysias and take a look at what Lysias has got to say. All right. So Lysias says, if you say that the lover is to be more esteemed, meaning more valued, because his love is thought to be greater, for he is willing to stay and do what is hateful to other men in order to please his beloved, that, if true, is only proof of how he will prefer any future love to his present and will injure his old love at the pleasure of the new. Right? That if you ditch your family because you're in love, you will ditch the person you're in love with when you're in love with somebody else. And I'll give you an example. My very favorite artist in the whole world after Shakespeare is a guy named David Lynch. He makes movies. And he made this TV show called Twin Peaks, and he makes these movies. If you take a film class with me years down the line, I have a whole class devoted to studying his work. Um, and he's my favorite. I just think he's the best. But he's kind of a dirtbag. He has a very bad habit of falling in love with someone, getting them pregnant, and then he feels like they love the baby more than they love him, and he goes for somebody else. He falls in love with somebody else, and he ditches the first wife and gets a second wife, and then he ditches the second wife for the third wife, and he ditches the third wife for the fourth wife. And it kind of sucks. And he's my favorite. He's like one of my favorite human beings in the whole world. But he doesn't seem that good on romantic relationships. But that's an example of the kind of thing Lysias is talking about. You may have examples of this kind of thing from people that you've known. It's always like the most hurtful thing when you fall in love with somebody, and then if you fall in love with somebody else, A lot of times you go, I never loved you. That's what you say to person number one, because you say crazy things when you're in love. And if you're in love with person number two and you say to person number one, I never loved you, again, it's exactly the kind of irrational behavior that Lysias is talking about, that kind of crazy need to like break all the rules, and that's not successful. It's not a solid foundation for creating a relationship. So, all right, cool. Huh. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a sidebar and talk about something else for a couple of minutes. Let's go back to this worksheet, our number one worksheet. And just to be clear, I'm not giving you any more of these. This is it. You do these things, you are passing the class. But I mentioned last time, right? There's you discuss what you read, and then you discuss your opinion on it. And you want to consider both sides, which is when you consider what someone who disagreed with you would say. And that's a big part of it. Um, so one of the things I want to point out, since we're talking about romantic relationships, is to say that these are the rules for how to do well in composition one, but it's also a good rule for doing well in your interpersonal relationships. If you can use this worksheet to help you write your essays, and you can also use this worksheet for fighting with your girlfriend, and you can use this worksheet when fighting with your friends. Why? What does the worksheet tell you to do? Number one, what did you read? Or in this case, what did you hear? Listen, understand. Right? Plato is not you. Plato is someone else. So what did they say? And make sure you fully understand what they have said before you say your opinion with reasons and examples. That is a recipe for sort of healthy discussion when you're fighting in a romantic relationship, because a lot of times what people do, well, what I think, blah, 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 I think this, well, I think that, well, I think this. Stop. What did they say? Listen to them. Repeat it back to them. Say, when someone says they're mad at you and they tell you why, say, let me make sure I've got this right. Are you saying, and then put it in your own words. Put the fight in your own words and say, just that way the person feels like you're listening to them, right? It's these techniques that work on Plato will also work on your boyfriend. When someone says something to you, because what I tell you to do, I don't start with your opinion. Start with what you read. Start with a quote. Put the quote in your own words. Explain it. Same thing when you're fighting with somebody, when your mom is yelling at you, right? Instead of just being like, here's why you're wrong, try going, let me make sure I understand you. Are you saying this, this, and this? Am I understanding you correctly? And I promise you, just doing that, they'll calm down because they feel listened to. And then it's your turn to speak after you have made it clear that you understand what they said, right? You listen to them, you put what they said in your own words, and then you can say, okay, I understand what you're saying. I was able to put it in my own words. I was able to give examples. I understand why you're angry with me. Now, let me tell you why you shouldn't be. Or you could also just be like, holy shit, they're right, I'm sorry. But you could also be like, okay, I understand why you're mad, but here's why you're wrong. If you do that step after you've listened for a bit, it's going to help you in those relationships. Yeah, okay, cool. So I say this is like a wide-ranging thing. In the 70s, they used to have this kind of therapy for married couples, and it involved using sentences like, when you say X, I hear Y. So it would be like, when you say, take out the trash, I hear, I'm the boss of you and you should do everything I say. Because you've ever gotten in a fight with somebody over something small like doing the dishes? Um, and you're not really mad about the dishes. You're mad because they're bossing you around. And that's actually a bigger issue than just the dishes. But they will be like, I can't believe you're getting this mad about the dishes. It's not the dishes. It's like your whole attitude. But how do you do that? Well, you gotta say, you gotta listen first, and then you gotta tell people what you heard. And that's step one. And then you can say, here's why I think this is wrong. And remember, just like for Plato, in romantic relationships, you can say, you are completely wrong. But you can also say, you're mostly wrong. You can say, look, I think you're right about a lot of things, but you're wrong about a couple of things too, right? That these are options in your, what I'm teaching you here is about thinking clearly. It'll come in handy for Plato. It'll come in handy in your day-to-day life. All right, I'll see you in the next video.